Normally on the show, we attempt to keep things as child-friendly as possible, but every now and then we can hit some harder subject matters or may even have some verbal discourses that may not be suitable for younger or more sensitive ears to hear. In this episode, there may be either a discussion on more mature topics or may have strong language, or perhaps both at once. Your discretion is advised.
Hello, fellow geekologists. Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. And what you're about to hear is a panel from the Geek Stage at Theology Beer Camp 2024 in Denver, Colorado. Joshua and I had such a great time at last year's Theology Beer Camp, connecting with friends, even podcasting with some of our heroes in the podcast game. What Trip Fuller does with Theology Beer Camp really does align with our mission and vision at Systematic Geekology. That is, in creating and curating safe and brave spaces to explore the big questions around what we all geek out on. And so thank you, Trip, for creating that space for us to have a geek stage and to have really deep and rich conversations around philosophical and theological and geeky things. And so we hope that all of you listening to this will join with us in this conversation, either in our socials or reaching out to us, and perhaps even attending a Theology Beer Camp and seeing us in person. Stay tuned for when and where Theology Beer Camp 2025 will be. And so we hope to see you there. Come out and geek out with us, and we hope that you will join in these conversations with us. Peace, friends.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast. All right, cool, guys. Well, welcome to the Geek Stage, the first panel we've got down here. We're at St. Andrew Methodist Church. I can't remember the name of the location. Really excited that we get to be here, though. It's a huge location, really cool. Not my first time in Denver, but I've enjoyed it so far. I'm Joshua Noel. I'm one of the hosts of Systematic Geekology. Will was just telling you about all of that. Nothing really more interesting about me, but do have another. Usually we have like two co-hosts and then someone we're going to talk to. So I have Taylor Thomas of Tillich Today. Awesome podcast. If you haven't checked that out, be sure you subscribe to that as well. She has a PhD in philosophy at, is that BU?
Yeah, Theology and Ethics.
Theology and Ethics. Okay. Cool. Sorry, I forgot. I'm like, I like her podcast. I am a nerd. But I'm also here. Benjamin Chicka is our keynote speaker for this particular breakout session. He is the senior lecturer of philosophy and religion at Curry College in Milton, Massachusetts, and the author of Playing as Others, Theology and Ethical Responsibility in Video Games. He's got a bunch of other books he's working on as well. Did you want to talk about some of the other stuff you're doing?
Sure. So thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. The flyers that were passed around, they have a promo code on them, but it's expired. If you really want to wait until next month, codes for the American Academy of Religion will be coming out. If you email me, I'll give you a new promo code. I'm working on a follow-up to that book. I'm writing about Paul Tillich and artificial intelligence right now, so I'm thinking a lot about technology and what it means for theology at the moment. But today I'm going to talk about kind of the motivation behind my book, Playing as Others. I came to it honestly. I'm the average age of a video game player right now. I grew up with the industry. I'm wearing my non-binary Space Invaders shirt, but I was going to wear like an Atari 2600 shirt because that was like my earliest memory playing that with my dad. When I'm writing about video games, I'm doing what Paul Tillich called the theology of culture. I'm the president of the North American Paul Tillich Society this year, and it's reductionistic to say that I'm just doing Paul Tillich's theology of culture for pop culture and specifically video games, but there are some real structural similarities. So one way to think about what we're doing when we talk about God and talk about theology and how we relate to what's ultimate has to do a lot with personal identity. How do you comport yourself in relation to what's ultimate? Societal forces can force you to do one thing and try to force you to do another thing, but you can be confident in who you are, that you're, say, a child of God, and God created you this way, so you know who you are. Tillich was already suspicious of supernatural talk in that way, that like a being created you to be in a very specific fashion. Paul Tillich was a German-American theologian, and he served in the German army in World War I, and he left Germany during World War II because he was pretty sure his friends convinced him Hitler was going to kill him. They were probably correct. During World War I, he was basically grappling with the problem of evil and noticing that for a loving God, it seems like my prayers, as he put it in his journal, are just muttering good thoughts to my dying friends as I pull them out of the mud. So it sure doesn't seem like a being is in control of all this world. So he was already messing with language, like God is the unconditioned context of the conditioned world. So everything here is a conditioned thing. We're conditioned in relation to one another, but God is unconditioned. So God can't be things like our attributes, like conditioned things are beings with certain attributes. God is the contrast of that. I like his later language. He would later talk about God as the abyss of being, or the ground of being is my favorite. If you know Tillich, you probably know the ground of being. And Tillich took that critique of kind of supernatural theology really, really seriously early on, but World War II just cemented it. If you know anything about the history of German churches in World War II, Tripp even played a little bit last night in his Bonhoeffer talk. That's not hyperbole. The German churches basically stood in line behind Hitler and the Third Reich and like, this is good, this is true, God approves of it. You know, it wasn't just Heidegger that was like, I approve of the Nazis because of my ideas. All the German churches were doing it too. So Tillich is reaching back to an older tradition. Plato, the Greeks, even older philosophers used to think about ultimate reality and name it God, but they didn't mean like a personal being that's like you and I, except infinite. So he's reaching back into that tradition, but he's simultaneously getting fed up with churches that aren't actually living up to their supposed ideals of like human flourishing and helping people like embrace who they are and accept themselves. They're exactly doing the opposite for anybody that's not a white German. So Tillich he enhances his kind of critique of supernatural theology at the time, really starts talking about the ground of being, or I like the abyss of being. Apparently he loved to reflect on bodies of water. So they're deep, dark. There's something meaningful there. Life is there, but it's also mysterious and kind of scary, and you don't know what's there. It's like he meant the ground language seriously, that God is literally not an extra entity, but just the ground of your being. You're here. You're not non-existent. We don't have non-existence. We have being. Forces try and destroy us, but you can be confident in who you are and kind of move forward with that. And he already, when in Germany, he had this speech called On the Idea of a Theology of Culture, which has been later translated, but for a long time, it was just a speech. And then he eventually wrote Theology of Culture. And he basically was thinking about the way that you could say, well, I'm confident in who I am because God created me and I feel accepted. He's not thinking of a supernatural God anymore, but he's thinking about how culture can basically do this. One of his famous phrases is religion is the substance of culture and culture is the form of religion. And he got engaged in the New York City art scene and in the expressionistic and impressionistic paintings. And he saw gay people, Jews, everybody who was persecuted in the Holocaust and killed being accepted. And he says, we're doing theology. People's autonomy is being affirmed. And they are who they are, and it's like flourishing rather than being kind of forced into a mold and only accepted if it meshes with that one mold. And he also, maybe one of his bigger twists of a phrase, he talked about heteronomy, which if you take it literally means like divine rule. So in like political theology, let's kind of make everybody follow like our, like whatever we think God's rules are. It actually more abstractly or generally means like everybody together. So we could all be like all our divisions go away in heaven and we're all like one in spirit when we're all with God in heaven. Tillich doesn't mean that, obviously. He's reacting and rejecting supernatural theology. But if like God is the ground of your being right here, right now, God is also the ground of like my being, your being, everybody else's being. And there could be like an aha moment where, well, if like I have the courage to be myself, even though society like might reject me, like I have some individual courage, a light bulb could go off and say like, oh, that's the case for everybody else too. And he saw theonomy as if a culture does it, it's basically religion. We're talking about it's manifesting theology. It's getting over conflicts between heteronymous forces. So you have to be homogeneous, heterogeneous, just like us. So the German church is saying only like us, or we're going to reject you. Autonomous reactions of individuals kind of confidently knowing who they are and rejecting that. But Tillich was kind of, he saw that as unfortunate because it should be possible to be who you are and live deeply in a community, which autonomous reactions to heteronymous forces. So forces of domination, we're only going to accept you if you be like this. Autonomous reactions are like great, but he also sometimes called theonomy autonomy united with its own depth, which is you're actually living deeply in a community with others now instead of in isolation. And the long and short of it is I see this happening in video games. Like video game communities are theological and kind of functioning as religious communities in the same way that Tillich thought artistic communities were basically doing theological work. So let me give you some examples. So that was nothing about video games, and this talk is supposed to be about video games. Has anybody played the game Gone Home or know what it is? So Gone Home was one of the first games they derisively threw the term walking simulator at. So this is not a video game. This is a walking simulator. You're just walking around a house, picking up objects and listening to audio logs. So this is not, we're not shooting people. This is not a video game. What are we doing here? Gone Home tells a story of realizing your character in the game, your sister, fell in love with another girl in high school in the highs and lows of coming out. And the game actually changed some conservative Christians' views on same-sex marriage. It came out in 2014 from being against it to being for it. So we have, I also know from, so there's been reporting on that. I also know I speak more at video game conventions and video game developer conferences than I do to fellow academics nowadays. And every time I give a talk, like literally after every single one, some LGBTQ plus individual comes up to me and is like, you gave me language for what happens to me. Like this is deeply like moving me, these video games. So picture somebody who maybe can't come out because it's physically dangerous for them. Like literally they could get killed in parts of the world still. Like that video game is more real than reality for them in some ways. Like they're actually themselves now. It's like that's autonomy united with his own depth. And for Tillich, that's theology. It's also changing the way people behave. So it's driving us toward theonomy when people who are rejecting people just for who they are, just because they're different, all of a sudden widen the circle and embrace them. That's forming a theonomous culture where everybody is finally being accepted and we're getting over divisions. It was big during the pandemic. People got Nintendo Switch owners. Did you play Animal Crossing New Horizons during the pandemic? During the pandemic, Nintendo put some of the worst stay-at-home orders, like really, no, we're going to stay at home and enforce it, was during Easter and Ramadan. Nintendo put some Christian objects in the game, and some churches actually made little altars, and they had Easter services in Animal Crossing. So they met virtually, and they shared a virtual space as opposed to being separated in Zoom blocks. So it's still virtual, but it's actually a shared virtual space versus separated Zooms. They didn't do anything, as always is the case, of course. They didn't do anything for non-Christian religions. So Rami Ismail, this independent game developer, says, well, I have some know-how, so I will make some objects in the game and edit them. And he said, this reminds me of my childhood where I broke the fast during Ramadan. And he made it a kind of interreligious comparative theology event. He had a big Twitter following. It's always Twitter, not X, for as long as that website exists. He tweeted out, come break fast with me. And if you're not Muslim, come and tell us, ask us why we're doing this, have a chat. And people came and they interviewed some people afterward. And think about a Muslim in middle of nowhere America that probably has no mosque nearby, or a student who's a Muslim at a small school. And all those schools tend to have pretty poor services for non-Christian students, like poor activities available. That shared space in a video game was more real and theologically meaningful than their real life condition in some ways. So it's not the content of games exactly, like, hey, look, there's something religious happening in a game. Just like Tillich was just looking at expressionist and impressionistic paintings. I've been talking with people, playing these games. It's like, this is theology happening in games, people's lives being affirmed, changing their behavior toward each other, and they're living deeply in a community as opposed to being isolated. I mean, the examples can go on and on. Tillich was a religious pluralist late in his life. I obviously am too. So the fact that they can kind of cross those borders, and we can talk about Muslim examples and the gone home Christian example. This is what it means for like a culture to be theological. So theology of culture. You're just looking at something that just looks like video games, but it's theological if you have the right lens.
I was going to see if I could get one example from you that you mentioned in, I don't remember which one. I read a bunch of articles all at once, but you talk about the example of how affirming spaces were created for people in the LGBTQ plus community, and like Mass Effect, specifically your MMO games, Skyrim, that kind of stuff, where you kind of have that ability to kind of have some gender fluidity in your choices. Could you maybe expand on some of what you were talking about with that?
Sure. So, did anybody play the Mass Effect games? Which version of Shep did you play as? Genuinely curious. Commander Shepard? So within the fan base, like by and large, so it was like you could be male Shepard or female Shepard. Fem Shep kind of became the canonical everybody's Shepard. Fem Shep was the real. They liked the voice acting more, basically. But it's not just in game changes. So somebody who's marginalized finds their life affirmed for the first time. Tillich gave great sermons. It's very funny. Ground of Being theologians. This includes some people that were mentors of Taylor and I. They have these very, very abstract, and if you're only familiar with supernatural theology, maybe hard to grasp concepts of what God and ultimate reality is, but they give great sermons. And they have fun titles, like Tillich's, some of his sermons were The Courage to Be and Accept That You're Accepted. He took that right from Luther, and he meant it pretty literally. Like, you can accept that you're accepted in the game just for no other reason than you're accepted, because the ground of your being is with you, always. You don't know how it's going to manifest, but it could happen through a game, it could happen through art. And then the community's changed too. So Fem Shep became the real Shep. Video game conventions started changing. So there's now safe spaces for LGBTQ plus folks at, say, I'm in the Boston area. PAX East is a huge video game convention attended by, now it's 4 days long, and it's probably over 125,000 people. I've given talks there, and 600, 700 people show up to it. So it's not just people who are interested in theology already. And I don't use some of these terms at a PAX East talk, but it's happening. So people, it's actually happening in their lives, and they just need some language to I needed the language to really, really express how it's happening. So PAX East has become more welcoming. As the industry has fractured a little bit, all the big websites have, it's a big problem. It's, late stage capitalism. Everybody's cutting jobs, but the personality based coverage that's happened since everybody's got a Patreon. They're all very deliberate, and our community is inclusive. We're going to kick you out, and it doesn't matter if you're paying for the Patreon. We can remove your access. You don't just get to pay and do whatever. Around especially trans issues. So Gamergate is still the mentality about, does Gamergate ring a bell for anybody? So just misogynistic, homophobic, just treating people terribly just because they're different than straight white male. Some of that mentality is still out there, especially around trans gamers, but all the big personality-based coverage very much is communities that are accepting. So the hate is actually somewhat being pushed to the margins as an inverse of what it used to be. So it's not perfect. Tillich talks about times of kairos, which is the right time, but it's always ambiguous because the ground of being is everywhere. So we can kind of be opaque to it and cover it up, or be transparent to it. So we can make hurtful or life-giving cultures. So we don't know what's going to happen in the given moment. There's bad elements still in video games, but the good forces could overcome. So it's not video games are going to save us and make heaven on earth. That's not what theonomy means. It's ambiguous, and it takes our participation to drive it. And even if bad things happen, that's a key that something it's perverting some meaning. It knows there's something meaningful there, and they're trying to restrict it. But now it's out in the open and we talk about it. So it's actually, I'm kind of pleased that some Gamergate voices are still out there because they're not hiding anymore. And the industry is actively trying to like push back against them. So it is not just the games themselves, it's communities as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Did you do you have anything like Tillich specific you wanted to ask? I know you were.
I do have a question for Ben that I think draws on his book, and it's very relevant here. It's not necessarily Tillich specific, but I guess it is specific in terms of like what Tillich thinks a theology of culture can actually do. So I would like it if you might elaborate a bit further on, like, you've talked about the experience of playing as someone you feel represented by in the game, but your book is called Playing as Other, right? So what does that difference do for you? Like, and how are you working Tillich into that?
So it's not just Tillich. I guess I'm in a Tillich mode since like I said, I'm president of the Tillich Society this year. So there's some unconscious aspect of me that's like I'm on a Tillich promotion tour or something. But Emmanuel Levinas is the other pillar of the book. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually, one of the things I'm proudest of in the book is that if you buy stereotypical academic like divisions of schools of thought, Levinas is like the start of postmodern thinking, and Tillich is like a epitome of like modern thinking. So obviously they disagree on everything and have nothing to do with one another. But you'll find in Tillich, now he doesn't dwell on it and write books and books and books about it like Levinas does, but you'll find in Tillich the inviolability of the other and the thing that you cannot cross, and is that like you can try, but you can never like cross that Rubicon, because the other, like their integrity, who they are, like that groundedness, you can try and change it, but it's all like an illusion and a mistake in your head. And like, so playing as others, I actually think makes both Levinas's points. So Levinas, if you don't know Levinas, my simple version is, humans are really good at creating in-groups and out-groups, which is basically what I've been talking about. And we are actually really good at it in a problematic way. Biologically, we seem to have a propensity to it. We just encounter people who like otherness. We're all different than each other, but we have like friends, family, religious memberships, political memberships that we're kind of comfortable with. And we don't really think about the fact that we're all different. And then at some point it's like, oh, this is too other and different and uncomfortable. And now you just treat people differently because they're other, not realizing that we're all actually different. So the point is, it doesn't matter who anybody is because we're all others to each other and different. So these in-group, out-groups that are based on like checklists of sort of similar to me or different are all just manufactured nonsense that violates something more basic and primary. But you don't encounter that when you talk about this issue. So reading Levinas, reading Tillich, talking about this, me saying this right now is not actually encountering another. People debating this on a 24-hour news channel is not actually encountering the other. You actually have to have an encounter. So reading Levinas is not an encounter of the other on the page, or even Tillich's. He has like a lengthy 2 paragraphs, and that he sounds totally like Levinas, but that's basically it that I found in him. But in a game, you have to encounter characters that are fully fledged and have like a context and the world that they live in. And I compare it to, this doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And it doesn't always happen is the unfortunate part, but often parents who are anti, say, gay rights has a kid that comes out. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh crap, I can't be against gay rights because I love my kid. And then they have a moment where like, oh, gay people are like humans, and like it's wrong to like treat humans this way, because they'd never thought of them as humans. They had thought of them as that other thing that's a political talking point. So in games, you got to interact with AI and characters, and it's not unlike actually having to have that aha moment of, oh, I've been mistreating a person, and that's like against my theology. Oops. So the fact that the AI characters have their own sort of integrity. Like going back to Mass Effect, the characters push back against you. So they actually, especially in the third one, have their own orientations. So you can't romance everybody in the game, because some of them are like, I'm not interested. I'm interested in her, but not you, depending on if you picked like male Commander Shepard or female Commander Shepard. Yeah. So the game pushes back on you and has its own sort of autonomy where it's like, no, like respect me. Like you have to respect me, the AI character, just like you want to be respected. So that's like, affirming autonomy, but like let's broaden it out to a group rather than just the games push back in a really important way too.
Yeah, I got a lot here. So I kind of paraphrased a couple of your lines when I was reading, and I should have wrote the whole quote down, but I am a bad podcaster. So no, but when you were talking about AI, you kind of say that refusing to see God in the virtual other equates to real sin, because like the ground of being exists in the art, and these characters are in a way still reflecting that ground of being. So when we're refusing to see that, we're still kind of and how Tillich uses the word sin and demonic are whole different things. Because I was also going to ask about like if we see that corruption in a game where it's not really reflecting the ground of being the way that we would think of it, how do we deal with like sin, demonic, like all this kind of stuff when we're interacting with what's not real? You know, a lot of us are like, hey, I'm going to play KOTOR and go completely dark side the whole time because that's just fun, you know?
So a lot of the games, so I gave a couple games as examples. You got to play in good faith. So there are people that just try and mess with games and see what they can get away with. But if you take the game on its like where it's at and play it seriously and the storyline and the characters it has, there's a chance to. Tillich does put it in terms of like the demonic sometimes. He uses religious language symbolically a lot, but he does mean that seriously, and that it's distorting something that's potentially true and beautiful and life-changing. Just like he was really critical of quote unquote realistic religious paintings. So he hated the Last Supper painting, and he's like, this is religiously insignificant and I hate it. But like expressionist paintings and impressionist paintings, he thought got you to think about the way they twist images, and like the scream is not a realistic looking face. Starry, starry night is not how an actual night sky looks. They twist something here right now to make you think there's maybe more going on. And whether or not you can see the more or not is what Tillich refers to as like you're demonically like distorting the potential for something to happen there. I sometimes put it as groundless grounds. Like you don't know how this is going to manifest itself in culture. But Tillich meant these things seriously. He said God is real but doesn't exist. But he does have an ontology, so he means that like God is the source of your existence. You're just going to have to get over thinking of God as a supernatural being. But that lets you really say things like, well, like the affirmation of who I am can happen through who knows what, a painting or a video game. But you gotta like kind of play the game in good faith, I guess I would say. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to, I guess, follow up on that. You know, speaking of Tillich's language, you know as well as I do, I study Tillich too, so we know that sometimes, even though it's evocative to people who grew up in a Christian context, that language like sin and demonic, right, he means something very different by that. It can get a little bit lost. In your research, do you see like a new language emerging, or do you see the possibility of, you know, some of those communities forming their own symbol sets to talk about these same experiences?
Yeah, I really think that Tillich would be super okay with. Tillich was in a weird place, right? So he's really when he comes to this country, especially 40s, 50s, 60s, and then he dies. He's known as a important thinker, and he was on the cover of Time magazine when that was a thing that mattered. But he's simultaneously really knowing that his ideas challenge, and he means them to challenge because he's seen how very traditional supernatural beliefs prevalent in a lot of churches harm people. And he wants to get over that. But he wants to speak their language so they don't just ignore him. So he uses phrases like the demonic, even though it's not exactly, you know, he's not talking about demons.
Yeah.
He's not talking about actual sinful forces in control of things. But he does mean distorting potential. But so he's playing with language symbolically. I think if he would have lived, you know, miraculously to a long age and been around today, I don't know if it's like a new language emerging. I just think he would have pushed his thought further. So like it really is just a theology of culture, and it's okay if they don't use the symbolic terms like Tillich does. I think he would still, I hope, would look at the religious, the video game communities and not have to force the symbolic twist of, we can use this word symbolically, but I don't actually mean it literally, and just say, well, look at functionally what's happening, the sorts of lives they're changing, the way they change other people's behavior towards others, and thus the community they're creating. I think you'd be okay with it. So I guess I don't have an answer of new language. So Taylor is also doing work about video games. I just want to throw it back at you. Do you see like a specific language? Like, answer your own question. Do you see?
You put that Uno reverse on me. Damn. No, I don't see a specific language popping up. I think I see my duty, and this is why I started the podcast on Tillich and want to talk to people like you and come to these events, is because I don't even know that we necessarily need those same, like, I don't think we need a word like sin or a word like demonic necessarily. I think we just need a way to explain to people that there's this depth penetrating reality and we have access to it, and that it's very spiritually evocative. Even though traditions do something for us, like I'm sort of on the boundary line between whether I'm still a Christian or not. And yet when I get revved up about a moral issue, I'm like, it is sin and Jesus would like, so I definitely use it. But I think the work we do and the work that we're doing here, if we can just get the point across that there's this depth there and that there's something there and that we don't have to just like go to work and then die. Like that's something,
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to bring you back to Mass Effect, and it's so funny because I was afraid I was going to make this a Kingdom Hearts talk, and here I am with Mass Effect. But speaking of Kingdom Hearts, I mean, when we're talking about like this theological language and stuff, one of the things that's challenged me is just how in that game, the main character kind of dies. He loses himself to darkness. He's split in two. And in that, you kind of see the redemption of all these enemies you've been fighting this whole time, as he works himself back to what does it mean to be, and finds that courage to be, if you will, learns to exist as himself. And it's just kind of one of those, like I see all this language. In a way, I think it's more helpful that I played the games first and then read your stuff, because I'm like, okay, I could see this. I've read 2 books from Paul Tillich this week, and the whole time I'm like, I've seen this somewhere, and it's in video games. And if I tell that to someone like my parents, they're going to be like, roll their eyes at me, maybe sigh, or they're like, you mean you just sit up there smashing buttons? It's not about. And I'm like, oh no, you don't understand. But what was I getting at? With Mass Effect, one of the things that you kind of hint at that I think can help us wrap up this part of the conversation. There were people who are able to experience the other as playing as femshep, right? Like we're playing as a female character, seeing that experience through their eyes. But then there was also the people who were like, I just kind of really like looking at femshep, So like when we're talking about like demonic and Tillich sense, is that kind of how you would look at that? Like there's the ability to play as the grounded being, see the art for what it is, or to really kind of turn it into, objectifying, I guess maybe is the right word.
Yeah, that's what I mean by That's what I mean by playing is good faith. Like you got to play the game in good faith. And that's when like Tillich uses demonic, but it's really just opaque or like shining right through like a freshly cleaned window. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're not playing as the ground of being. It's just like in this experience, it's breaking through and manifesting mm-hmm. in personal confidence, changing your behavior towards others. But it's just playing in good faith. But there's games that so this kind of makes me think of a better answer to Taylor your question about playing as others. So you're not just having an experience of encountering others in games. You are actually you can play as people quite unlike you. I'm going to spoil the ending of Nier Automata. It's quite old by now, but it's like a perfect example of something I think is important to say. So we're in an academic-ish context, whatever Tripp's thing is. Academic-ish is, I'm fine. Yeah. We were in grad school at the same time. I can call him that, sure. Ending of Nier Automata. It's this really difficult, you're kind of, it's like a shoot 'em up, and your character is flying as a ship through the ending credit scene, and you're just shooting bullets, and these enemies just keep flooding the screen, and it's like way too many. And these ships come in from the side of the screen and start taking them all out for you as the credits are playing. And you have to play the game like 5 times to get to this real ending, but like, it gets shorter each time. They basically save you, and you get to the end of the game, and it says, "Do you want to help others?" So it reveals to you that was real people's like character. They played the game and finished it, and that was other people who played the game coming to your rescue, and to make your like you're going to help other people. It says, "Do you want to do that? And if so, we're going to delete your save file." Ooh. So you're going to sacrifice yourself to help these other people. So it puts you in the position of the other at that moment. Like you would not have beaten the game. It was very clear. Like you're going to die if these other ships don't come in. So they did for you. Now, what are you going to do for them? And it really, like, the game's not about you at that point, and it's all about the others. So I absolutely deleted my save file, and it's one of the most beautiful endings of a game. It also has an existentialist robot in the game, so you should play it for that reason too.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like a lot of people hear that like, okay, you delete your save file, but I'm like obsessive. I still have like my original PlayStation 2 just because there's a save file on there where I have Sora at level 99 on the original Kingdom Hearts, and I'm like, I'm not touching that.
Oh yeah, no,
that save file will exist forever.
That save file was like easily 65, 70 hours.
God, yeah, that's tough. Sacred. Yeah, sacred saved files. That's the name of this stuff. So I had some other video game specific stuff, but I want to leave time for audience questions too. So to help us figure out which questions we want to ask, could you guys just maybe shout out some games that y'all play so we know like we're not just talking about stuff that y'all care about?
Yeah, it is going to be a video game podcast, so we're not doing that unless we say what we've been playing lately, right?
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Anybody have any games they've been playing lately, or just your favorite games you want to shout out?
Kind of the mutability of roguelikes and how it's constant.
What game is that?
Just
roguelikes?
Just the genre of game.
Oh,
okay.
Of incremental progress and constantly starting over.
Yeah.
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Hades.
Hades. All right. Cool stuff. Elysium.
Can we touch on our life as a simulating game?
That's for the Matrix talk. We actually have to exit the Matrix before we have that conversation.
Program an NPC.
Yeah, you're not supposed to ask that. Any others? I know we got Galaga. Will likes Galaga. Donkey Kong. Persona. The Witcher. Okay. Yeah, Witcher's pretty cool.
The Witcher's interesting. So I want to make a few comments. Witcher's interesting because I love the unintended consequences bit, which is like you can choose the right thing, but The Witcher doesn't play by traditional video game rules. It's not like the first Mass Effect with the Paragon system was a little bit like this. So if you're going to be good or bad, the choices are like, do you want to like save the starving children, or do you want to punt baby kittens into the blast furnace? You know, it's The Witcher. You feel like you do the good thing, and then something terrible happens, and then like, is your Witcher good or bad? Life is messy that way, or you think you do something good and it doesn't turn out that way. I really like. Have anybody else played Undertale? So it's great because it's an RPG and it makes you think you're supposed to battle these characters. And then it has an aha moment where it's like none of its mechanics are actually what you think. And it's basically a pacifist game, but it remembers what you did unless you edit the save file. So you can't go back. Like you mistreated people, you harmed them. You can restart the game. You can delete the game, but it actually hides a file on your computer. Then unless you look up where to find it, you can restart the game and it remembers what you did, because our actions on people have lasting impacts. You can't just say, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It's like you actually did the thing to the person. So it's an interesting play on ethics.
If I say one more thing, so I don't play any games right now. I'd be interested to see what suggestions people have to play a game that doesn't involve any other equipment other than a Mac. Like, what could you get into that doesn't require like an entire gaming chair, console setup? You know, any suggestions on where to start, like an RPG style, like D&D?
That was fun. Yeah.
Like, what would be great levels? What could I get into that would be something fun, something that would be like interacting with other people? Anyways, that would be my question.
So really, look at the table of contents of my book. There's some flyers were passed out. There's a few more up here. And I focus on indie games. They're shorter by and large, and they run on just about everything. So I mentioned Gone Home already. That'll play on a MacBook nowadays. I didn't mention Papers, Please, but it's a great game about immigration that makes it's ethically complex and doesn't give easy, progressive, religious answers, because it shows care for the Border Patrol officers too, because they have families that need to be taken care of. And if they don't do their job, they can like have their pay docked, and like they have to do it. Like it's their job, they got to do it. And if they got to live. So it's a great complex game. It'll run on anything. That wouldn't run as well, I don't think.
I know one that has absolutely nothing to do with anything we're talking about, but it's fun as hell. I Want to Be the Guy. It's impossibly difficult, and for some reason that's what makes it fun. And I think everybody should at least play it some, because if you do get to be the one person who, like, one of the few that actually make it all the way through, you're like, I'm the guy. And there's just something about that, Before we do open up to regular, I want to be the guy.
Oh, I want to be the guy.
It's great. Apples will fall up from a tree to kill you just because.
Can I make one more specific suggestion?
Yes.
So you played D&D for the first time. Go to the website Good Old Games, so GOG.com. Get the original Baldur's Gate. Get the original Icewind Dale. Get Baldur's Gate 2 after you've played Baldur's Gate.
KOTOR.
They're all enhanced editions now, but go to GOG.com and get those.
Yeah, and KOTOR's on everything these days too. You can even get that on your phone now. Knights of the Old Republic. So it's Star Wars, open world-ish, I guess, RPG. I don't know how you say that. It's a little bit older, but it's good. I think they're doing remakes soon. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So I had just one more I want to ask before we do audience questions.
Yes, I do want to get to audience Q&A, so I'm just...
Yes, this is the last one.
It's already been evident. I'm not just giving a talk. It's a conversation.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of I have 3 games in mind as examples here for this. But so Call of Duty, Ratchet and Clank, and then I'm thinking of the Shadow of Mordor. Okay. So all of these games, enemies will interact with you. They'll talk back. They have real personalities. Is there an ethical difference in your mind, thinking of the Other, all that stuff, when you're killing an ogre as opposed to a fellow human, as opposed to in Ratchet and Clank, the whole storyline is robots are better than organic matter, so we kill robots, but we don't kill the organics. So is there an ethical difference when the Other is a robot if it still has the same personality, even if it's in a game?
Well, first Call of Duty. There's been an ethical difference in Call of Duty just over the past decade and a half. Mm-hmm. It was guaranteed if you were playing a first-person shooter in the early 2000s, you were a white guy just mowing down black and brown people who were all the enemies. Mm-hmm. And now you actually have multiracial, multigender squads. Yeah. And who knew there's innocent civilians that aren't terrorists who need to be shot in the Middle East. So Call of Duty has done a much better job. Yes, so an orc that's trying to kill you, but it's interesting in that the Shadow of Mordor and the sequel, Shadow was the first one, right?
Yeah, Shadow of Mordor and
Shadow of War.
God, yeah, that sounds right.
They give the orcs some personality. So an orc trying to kill you is an orc trying to kill you. So life and death situations, I think you're allowed to protect yourself, but they do give them character. Yeah. I don't know. Pushback? Add on?
No pushback. What came to mind when you listed those games is Helldivers, in juxtaposed beside Call of Duty. Me and Ben play Helldivers online, right? And it's kind of like the antidote to Call of Duty. As much as I love that game, where it's there's some satire in it, and you're having to kind of think about yourself as basically a space colonizer. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, it's. I find it amazing that some people don't get that you're playing as the bad guys in this. You are just space. It's Starship Troopers. You're space Nazis. But yeah, that. I mean, playing as an other there is problematizing. Like it's the way I said Tillich thought of cultural moments as kairotic, like the right time. Like it's bringing something out like that we don't talk about. Of like, there's aspects of American empire that are very like nationalistic and even Naziistic, if we're honest about the way we operate sometimes. And this video game is like, and we're proud of it. And then you're like, no, I don't like, I'm having fun playing, but this like, I think we're the bad guys. I'm like, yeah, guys, we're the bad guys. So playing as the other that way it's kind of like a form of deconstruction of problematic things that have been assumed.
Yeah.
Do you ever find kind of where, so there's kind of the two different aspects of like, you can play a game for like just the fun story and all of that, but you all have the other side where games like That Dragon Cancer, which is, if anybody's not familiar with it, kind of based on a true story about a family who's living their life with a 4-year-old who has cancer. And like, it's just a really heart-wrenching game, but it allows you to be and experience something that I normally wouldn't plus be able to experience. And so do you ever see kind of a turn to using more video games for those experiences that are in real life as well?
So That Dragon Cancer is actually actively being used in some seminary classrooms for pastoral counseling to help, because the parents of that child, the kid's name was Joel. I'm forgetting the parent's name, but they worked with the dev team to tell their story, and they play with the video game space and that you can kind of do whatever with it to imagine. So they question God in the course of going through their grief, and they play with fantasy worlds of video games to think about what would it mean for our son to still have eternal meaning, even though he's not with us anymore. So they kind of, it gets dark, and then their dead son in the game goes on like an uplifting journey, and they play with going through space, which is kind of like connects with an afterlife sort of thing. So that's being used in seminary classrooms right now, I know. But I tell people it's like, this will become more common. I started off saying I'm the average age of video game players. It used to be a ridiculous notion that we would talk about theology and film or theology and TV shows, but now every seminary in the country has some class on theology and movies.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing as movies in the sense that there's blockbuster movies that are not particularly meaningful, and they're either fun or they're not. Like, not all video games are necessarily ripe for theological analysis. And if you have fun, that's great. And then if you don't, you don't.
Yeah. Do we have any other audience questions? I'll do front first.
Yeah. Something I'm going back and forth is you keep talking about like part of when the game starts off with a make your own character screen. That after you put your character together, the game says, "Wow, that's incredible," but we're just going to discard that and not use that anyway. And then at the end of it, we see that the character like removes the cursor that like you played.
So
or do you see it that way?
the way would you word that question just kind of as playing the game in good faith? How do we play a game in good faith if the game isn't trying to respect our own autonomy? Is that kind of the question? Okay.
Well, I would say in some cases the games want to make you feel uncomfortable for a point. Because, like, doesn't this feel bad when you're not allowed to make this choice and your choice is discarded or eliminated? It's kind of a negative version of the end of Nier Automata, where it's trying to make you think about the other person's position. But in a negative sense, wouldn't this suck if you were doing this to other people, but we're going to do it to you and you don't have a choice? But that's also the real world where some people like don't have choices. So being uncomfortable. It's October. I love kind of artsy, meaningful horror movies because they make us look at the parts of life that theologians tend to not want to talk about because they want to think about meaningful things, and they make us think about like my life being taken away, whether it's too soon and like what did I waste my time on? Like they make us look at dark aspects of life that are real, but we don't talk about enough, but maybe we should. So I think of Deltarune and some part of Papers, Please. The game pushes back a little bit in the sense that the best ending you have to depend on somebody breaking the immigration rules for your family to help you get out. The way that if you were playing the game, quote unquote, correctly, you wouldn't have been doing that for other people. And then the game kind of challenges you on that. So I think they're trying to make you uncomfortable with a point. That we actually do this to each other and that isn't uncomfortable. So I would say they're in line with what I've been saying about ground of being theology is about empowering people and then widening the group of who is accepted. There can be uncomfortable ways of doing that and comfortable ways of doing that.
Yeah. We got 10 more minutes, so let's go ahead and do a couple more questions.
Hey guys, Christian here. Have you ever wondered why you should become a patron? Well, let me help you out. Because if you become a patron, what you can do is have live access to our YouTube exclusives like Comic Book Ketchup, Drinks with Teachers, Manga Mustard, and a companion series that go along with our annual theme. You can be there live, commenting with us. We really want you there. You also get access to exclusive merch. We have t-shirts, mugs, handbags, long sleeve shirts, all over the place for you, for your help in helping us. Also, we have extra bonus questions for you to look at. We have 4 to 8 times a month doing that. We have exclusive Discord channels for you, discounts at our store, access to any future D&D campaigns, and you can easily access all the patron content through our Spotify page at the top where it says exclusive content for subscribers. Also, one of the new things we're adding is voting privileges for future episode topics. We're going to be doing specific things for you, voted by the patrons, and you also get that extra satisfaction of just helping us out, and we appreciate all you do.
So I'm curious about, in talking about the culture of video games, you have like the creators of video games and the art itself and the people playing the video games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about how this applies to sort of the in-between space of people doing like mods and hacks or streaming or like speedrun communities where you are engaging with the game.
Gotcha. So the question would be, how do we talk about these things when there's that space between creators and players where sometimes players want to do like mods or speedruns or engage in a different way? Is there still a way that that's applicable to playing in good faith? Yeah, great question.
So like, I don't think good faith is necessarily playing the way it was like meant to be played. Ludonarrative dissonance is a term that I like. It originated around the first BioShock game because the story wants you to have sympathy for these little sister characters. But in the story of the game, you know they're kind of creating and part of like all these monstrous people that you've been facing. So the game is just mowing down people with guns and magic powers, basically. And then the story is, but have some sympathy and do a kind-hearted thing. And so the game Ludo or the gameplay Ludo narrative story don't mash; they're dissonant. But Papers, Please is Ludo narrative dissonant. The correct way to play is process all the immigrants' paperwork correctly. But the game arguably encourages you to play it incorrectly because it has the people talk to you and tell you stories. So some of these immigrants are like, the person behind me is like sexually trafficking me and I'm going to die. Don't let him through. You can do whatever you want. You can reject his passport and like turn him away, or you do it correctly. And then I think you're killing this woman. You have no reason to not trust what she's saying. I think about mods in a similar way. There have been mods that have overturned problematic games. So there's no diverse representation. So they make modded characters. What year was this done? I think it was last year. So after Roe v. Wade was overturned, modders put abortion mods into The Sims.
That's funny.
So like that's good faith of not following the rules, but of like taking the game in terms of like honestly what it's capable of and what it can do. So I wouldn't say good faith is just following the rules, but it's messing with it just to mess with it, or in the case of modding, messing with it because you see something there. I don't think that's against good faith.
Yeah, that's I think for me one of the most interesting sets of mods are like the Pokemon games because they're clearly made for kids. Nintendo doesn't like the mods, but a lot of these mods.
I was going to say, don't do it; they'll sue you.
Yeah, but a lot of the mods that people use actually, I feel like allows adults to play it in good faith because it's hard to play some of these where it's like it's so easy, but then some of the mods make it where it's your Pokemon really die or there's like more real consequences, so it's able to engage the story more honestly, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah, there's interesting mods.
Yeah.
Like there's mods in the same way that people can do terrible things to female characters, especially. If you want to watch some gross videos, see what characters do to women in Red Dead Redemption 2. But Red Dead Redemption 2 also has an ethical story of a character kind of being a bad person and then coming to grips with it, and it may be too late. And the actual story of Red Dead, I think, is interesting. But the game lets you do whatever. So that's not unlike making a mod that's monstrous or a mod that actually is saying, well, you're going to take away our abortion rights. We're going to inject them into this game.
Yeah. All right, just got a couple more minutes. I know you had one.
Yep.
Yeah. So the question is about the implications of embodied theology around how we're playing as the other in our games.
Yep. So like, yeah, couch co-op is dead. We used to do that in the 90s and now not anymore. It's all online. So first of all, I worked in a neuroscience lab when I was still a graduate student, and I applied some of that research to video games in this book. So we know now that our bodies react to online interactions. And then there was an aha moment where we did a study of reacting to videos. So not interacting, but just watching something. So then, okay, we interact online. We can just watch something. So playing video games, the lab studied oxytocin, which we can talk about. I'm not going to get, I want more questions, but we can talk about what that means. You get spikes of it, just like we do nice things to each other. You get a spike in it. It makes us nicer to each other. We get that online. We get it in video games. So we actually do react bodily, but in terms of the actual in-person interaction, sure, something's lost. But the way I say, like, no, these games are more real than reality for some people. I gave you like an unfortunate real life situation. The video game is more real or better real than that. There's tons of stories of people who met online, got married and stayed married and are still married and have like a great relationship. There are players who never played couch co-op, but they played online, and one of them gets a cancer diagnosis and it's severe. And they all get together for the first time at their deathbed so they can say bye to their friend who they only played with online before they die. So is it the same? No, but there's still something very real there that people are getting connections still.
For sure. We're going to go a little bit over, but we started a little bit late. So I'm going to do one more question. And then the great thing about Theology Beer Camp is that we're all hanging out. You guys can always just come up and ask anybody.
Yeah, I'll hang around afterward.
Yeah. So the question is, a lot of times we go to video games for escape, but is there a good way to practice seeing the other and bettering ourselves in our games while we're doing this?
For everybody in the room, I'm pretty sure Joshua is repeating the questions, so they're on mic for the podcast.
Yeah. I thought we said that ahead of time. I might have forgot. My bad.
I mean, I do kind of, there have been surveys, and I guess I kind of fall into this. If there's a chance to create a character, I create something different for the sake of like, well, if you're going to give me the choice to have more diversity in the game, I'll create some character that's different, see what the experience is like. Really, I think it's just having, like I said, when I speak at video game conventions, usually somebody comes up to me after my talks and is just like, you gave me language that helps me understand, like nothing about my experience changed. I just have the language to understand it and express it now and know that something actually happened. So these philosophers and theologians, like the experience was what it was, but now I actually understand it better. Just thinking about these, so like a practice, a tool, I mean, that'd be interesting, like practical video game theology or something like that.
Actually, do you mind if I follow up on that?
If you have an idea.
And this is something, like, I got this from talking with Ben and about Ben's book. I started thinking about video games a little bit differently. So, like, now when I go into a video game, if I really want to be intentional, you know, I don't turn on a podcast or a YouTube video while I'm watching. I put on a headset and I'm focused on the game. So I was playing Pacific Drive. That was one, and I really just tried to take in the environment, and it did change something in me, like in that moment. or like when I'm playing, an RPG. So I really like Assassin's Creed, and I've started playing Assassin's Creed a little bit different, where I'm like, okay, but what time is this character in, and what's the relationships like, and like what would I do, if I'm really taking this person's predicament seriously. Or like with Spider-Man, I told you I was setting up fans so that I could really get into the swinging. But just like,
That's so cool.
Right?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, for me myself, just like following up on that too, is like, I have this weird thing of like, you guys know I love Kingdom Hearts already. Will has a drinking game. Every time I say it, he has to take a drink, and he's already plastered. I'm sorry. No, but I take some of the songs from like different moments, like they have different themes throughout the game, and I'll meditate to that as like a spiritual practice, because like I know these moments of like when he's discovering that these other hearts lived in him or these other things, that I'm like able to just kind of think of like my interconnectiveness and how we're all interwoven in that. And yeah, it's weird, but I think the big thing for me was just kind of giving myself permission to say, hey, everyone else might think this is silly and stupid, but if I take it serious and I find meaning in it, then it is good for me. So just kind of giving yourself permission, I think, is a huge part of that.
Sorry. I got one more.
Sorry, Taylor.
Sorry. No, just one more thing, because this is something that me and Ben talks a lot about. So my favorite game ever is Battlefield 1. It's the one set in World War I, right? And I love that game because there's a scene where you get to play as a pigeon, and it feels so dumb, but the soundtrack, the music, you're captivated by it, and the pigeon is flying above all of this violence. And like I have some trauma from some violence that I was experiencing, and I was telling Ben during a podcast that like I think that game cured me for a little bit. Like every time I have an episode, I go play as that pigeon because it makes me feel like I'm liberated from all of that emotion. And I found an online Reddit forum, and there are people who have that same experience. Where like playing as a damn pigeon, a pigeon.
Yeah, no, it's...
If I could add one more. So I did think of one more practical, but also very specific to me example. I love Tetris Effect. And Tetris Effect puts me in a meditative state to be ready to appreciate video games as a medium that could change me in some way. If you're stressed out, it also can just like relax you. So if you're not even thinking about theology stuff, but Tetris Effect, amazing. It's Tetris amped up, and the art is beautiful, the music is playing, so you can get really like intense high play Tetris, or the most relaxing like meditative state that I am, the music with the pieces, the way they're flowing, and the way the art looks.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, guys, don't want you guys to miss what's going on next in the event. Ben, thank you so much for joining us, man. Yeah, give it up for Ben. Again, we're going to be around if you guys want to ask Ben, Taylor, or myself any questions. You can find Taylor Thomas at Tillich Today, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow that. Ben has those flyers. If you want to see his books, is playing as other theology and ethical responsibility in video games is kind of what his talk was. Will and I are part of Systematic Geekology. That stuff's around too. So if you guys want to follow us, do so. And thank you guys for joining us. So yeah, we really appreciate you all. All right.
Nice. Yeah.
That was fun.
That was fun. Yeah.
Check out our merch online at the SG Shop. There you can find clothing such as hat, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more things like glassware, mugs, bags, and posters. My favorite shirt design is the one that says all reading counts. So make sure you check out the store and find your new favorite merch.
Hi, my name is TJ, and I'm here to tell you about the Anazal Ministry Podcast Network. We have a bunch of shows on AMP. You can follow the entire network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazal Ministry Podcasts, or on the network page on Apple Podcasts. Some of the ones we're running right now are The Homily, which is Pastor Will's homily messages from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Chapel Hill. We have the Whole Church Podcast, which one of my favorites. It's where myself and Joshua, we interview leaders from different denominations and backgrounds to work for a full church unity, Big C. We have My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight, former host on Systematic Geekology. He discusses his experience at seminary and discusses seminary topics so anyone can access the knowledge, which is kind of cool. It's like the book, everything you learn in business school and then everything you don't learn at business school. That's great. We have Let Nothing Move You by Christian Ashley. He goes through the Bible kind of like it's a Bible study to explain the biblical narrative through his perspective and what he's learned. Dummy for Theology, which is Joshua's show, he discusses various theological topics in an attempt to show every side of big discussions. That leaves you with more questions than answers, which everyone loves a lot. It's kind of a continuation of a series that we did on Whole Church, but it's really good. It's really fun. We have the Bible After Hours, where the foul-mouthed preacher goes through the Bible from a progressive view to challenge the status quo of the modern church. I love that one. If you're from a more conservative background, that one I find will probably be the most helpful for you. Definitely check that out. And we have the Clydes. Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde go through weekly discussions in a devotional, conversational method to help us get closer to one another and God. That's just a little review of what we do in AMP and all of our other shows. So check that out, get subscribed, and just start getting all that free content,